And these gentlemen will probably be the first to tell you they represent thousands of firefighters and law enforcement who have worked and are continuing to work tirelessly to protect us and help our community. So again, thank you. Thank you for coming, making time to come. What we wanted to do is give them a little chance to share some updates and some perspective on the big, broad picture of what's been going on. And so we'll jump right into that. I think Chief Gaveda, you're up first.
Well, good morning. It's an honor to come and talk to you this morning. It's been a long road. I think a lot of you have been affected in here, and our sincere condolences to all of you that have seen any kind of loss or been impacted from this fire. It's the 26th day of this fire since it started. It is, as you know, one of the most damaging and complex fires that we've ever seen in this area. This morning we're at 218,598 acres on the fire. We're 75% contained. That number is going to go up a little bit as we move forward. We have some pretty big unburned islands in the middle of the fire that we're gently trying to burn in so that we don't allow the fire to get mad again and get up and run on the interior and create problems for us. But the perimeter of the fire is pretty secure, and it's holding in place and has been for about the last 4 days. So that's good news for us. Some of the successes that we've seen on this fire, obviously our number one priority is safety of everybody, the citizens, the cooperators, and all the firefighters fighting the fire. But number right behind that is getting folks back into their homes. And I know the sheriff will talk a little bit about that. We had a lot of people displaced from their homes and a lot of communities affected, both in Shasta County, the city of Redding, and Trinity County. And that was a huge success for us to get those folks back into their homes, try to get some normalcy back. We did lose 1,079 residential structures on this fire, which is a significant number of structure loss out there, so we have a lot of displaced families. But again, we're looking for the bright spots in this. Things are getting better every day. The efforts that are going on out there with all the cooperators, from the service providers, for utility companies, roadways, just a myriad of, an army of agencies and organizations that have come together. The community has come together is something to really behold, because the speed at which these things have occurred over the last 26 days is incredible. To get the roadways back open, to get people back in, it is really an effort across the board with all the agencies. So anyway, just up on the map here, as I was saying, the perimeter of the fire, really all the way around the south end of this fire, all the way up the west side and across the north end, is contained. Oh, perfect, thank you. We've got good perimeter all the way around this thing. All the way up and around. We basically pinned it against Shasta Lake, if that makes sense to everybody. That's quite a distance when you look at from Keswick Dam area, down here, Sacramento River and Keswick area, all the way up to Little Sugarloaf Creek, which is right by Sugarloaf, if many of you know where that's at by Lakehead. That's quite a distance. We have taken the opportunity to try and cut off some of these areas to keep it out of the lakefront. And currently what you're seeing up there with the smoke columns is basically this area all in here is that unburned area that I was talking about that we have to burn. Many of you have seen some of the fire coming off of Ahimatosh, which is north of town. You've seen streams of fire coming down off that mountain over the last few days. That is us running spikes off that thing, just low intensity fire to burn all that in, understory type burning as best as we can to really secure this fire to the lake and really take away any opportunities for it to do any other damage. So with that, we could look at a weather map. We did have a lot of infrastructure on this incident that we normally don't see. We have the Central Valley Project, the Shasta Lake, and Whiskey Town, and the Sacramento River that really affects the drinking water in the state of California. It also has a lot of hydroelectric plants attached to that with, Western Area Power Authority and PG&E and all of them that are supplying power really to the entire West Coast over in Humboldt County and on down through the coast as well as Trinity County. A very complex thing. But really what happened on this fire is what we experience in Redding a lot of times, and really through Trinity County and the western part of Shasta County, is a thermal low. You can see it on the weather usually when we're 110 degrees in Redding, and it's 52, 58 degrees in Arcata. We have what we call a thermal low effect that is created. The valley floor in here around Redding, when it's we had record highs during this fire of 113 degrees. All that hot air is going to rise. And when it does, it creates a low pressure down in the valley floor. Well, the balloon gets empty. If you picture the low pressure as an empty balloon. Over at the coast, however, with cooler air, that air sinks and creates a high pressure at the coast, which fills the balloon over here. Well, if you connect two balloons together, what do they want to do? They want to equalize, right? So this air over in the Arcata, Eureka, Trinidad areas, it grabs these drainages, comes up over the range tops, and is trying to fill in this empty balloon. When it does that, it comes off these higher elevations, and as air comes back down to do that, it compresses and it heats up. And it really creates the perfect storm for us with fires on the west side of Redding all the way over through Trinity County. And that's what we experienced with this fire to some extreme measures, because the bigger that temperature difference, 113 to 59, the stronger those winds. And we saw them in a very erratic manner show up at different times of the afternoon and evenings. That really gave us a tough time. We got the fire out and got it to what we call plume domination. When the fire starts, the column starts getting so large in the atmosphere, it'll go up to 40,000 feet elevation and starts creating its own weather, and you see that roll vortice or that twist to the column. It's no different than any other natural disaster, hurricanes and tornadoes. And that's what we saw. So speaking of tornadoes and fire tornadoes, we saw these on this fire. They're saying there's no exact number to how many we had, but they're thinking that there was 3 to 5 of them. The largest of those came through the Keswick area and out through Keswick Dam Road, up through Stanford Hills and Land Park, and that's where we saw a lot of damage. And we also lost some folks up in that area during this fire. What really causes that is that thermal low is pulling that wind in and it's pushing fire downhill into Redding, and it's compressing as it's doing it. And then it comes across the Sacramento River and at the base of Keswick Dam. So as the water is flowing down from Keswick Dam and down into the Sacramento River, you get this eddying effect down in here and turbulent air. When the fire front crosses the river, it's already got a roll vortice to it, and it picks up this, what we call a hydraulic jump. It grabs this and it helps that spin continue, and it creates a fire tornado. I'm not a scientist, but this is really similar to what you would see in Kansas without fire in it. This one was clocked at 165 miles an hour at its height. It was moving 2.5 miles an hour. It was considered an F3 category type tornado, but with fire in it, with a temperature of 2,700 degrees. So it did some destruction that's pretty amazing. It melted large transmission lines, the big, huge towers that you see. One of those was melted, another one disappeared. There was a lot of stuff that we don't normally see as firefighters. So this fire is historic in many ways. There'll be a lot of scientific studies that go on about what we saw here, but that's what we've been dealing with for 26 days, and things are outstanding compared to where we've been today. So again, with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Mike Heber.
All right, good morning. My name is Mike Hubert. I'm the unit chief for CAL FIRE here in the Shasta County unit, and also the chief of the Shasta County Fire Department. And so this has been a long, trying event for many people. I'd like to just start out by saying I understand approximately 16 people here, faculty, houses were destroyed by this fire, and we are truly sorry for that. We've lost, just watching and seeing many of our friends, families, co-workers' houses destroyed in this fire. It's just been very trying. We feel for what you're going through, and just keep standing each other up, because that's what's going to make us stronger in the end when we come out of this, and we will come out of this stronger when we get there. It's going to take some time, but we will get there. What I wanted to show you today, and tie it into what we did here at the college, is some video. So I got the first one up, and this one was taken on at 1846 hours, 6:46, from the power lines near Buenaventura, looking toward Iron Mountain Road. This was the fire behavior just before the tornado. So this was at 6:46. You can see what we were looking at all around as the fire was getting ready to come in through Keswick. It's actually somewhat benign right now. There's a lot of fire on the ground, but it's not the tornado yet. So just to set this up, this was on that Thursday, the 26th. That is the day that the dozer operator, Don Smith, died. Just after this, that is the day that we had 3 firefighters get burned. Right after this, that is the day we had 2 dozer operators get burned. You'll see the video when it happened, right after this. And that is the day that our friend Jeremy Stoke died. Right after this. Go ahead and go to the next. So this next video was taken at 7:17 hours. 7:17 p.m. I actually recognize the voice of Dave Law after I heard it a few times, looking toward Iron Mountain Road from his house, which is very near those power lines.
Okay, Mike, take a look at that. That's incredible. Yeah, it's roaring straight into the city of Redford.
You see, just in 30 minutes, a huge pickup in intensity, a wall of fire coming through. That's about the time where the dozers burned over back near Benson Road. We can go to the next video, which will be at 7:38 p.m., taken by one of our fire prevention officers in Land Park. You can see that twist coming. That quite honestly scared the hell out of every person that was up there. And now, again, that's 7:38, 4 minutes later, we'll go to the next video. That was taken by our helicopter, it's called our helico, looking from the north to the south. The tornadoes over Land Park subdivision in the Stanford Hills. Note that the Keswick estates hadn't burned yet. Look at the fire coming at each other, side to side. Right about here is Buenaventura, the north end of Buenaventura. So north end of Buenaventura, and then you can go over the river and back and ready. You can see up here, look at the fire that high up, look right there. Garage door, we don't know what that is, something very large up in the air. Sitting right back here, there's a couple fire engines, a bunch of residents from that land park that they were keeping safe. In the middle of this, 2 of our folks in 2 separate vehicles got caught right at the exterior of this. They blew all their windows out. They had a family in the car with them. They all told me they thought they were going to die. They somehow came out. One person, of course, didn't, and that is Jeremy Stowe. So this is what we were facing when we were going through that evacuation, that firestorm. Again, the fire was moving this way, but it spotted down to the river, and it just drew on itself. All these houses ended up burning afterwards, after this tornado, there in the Keswick Estates. That's that's where we had the huge evacuations. That's where the college came in. That's where all our evacuation centers came in. The sheriff and I were together, driving around, going around the backside on this, across Keswick Dam Boulevard, or across the dam itself. And the amount of people we saw, A, not leaving, who should have been leaving, and B, once we hit Lake Boulevard, the vehicles that were stuck. The town is not designed for 38,000 people to leave at once. They were stuck. If you were part of it, you know that. On Lake Boulevard, on I-5, every artery stuck. The evacuation centers, what we have here with probably 800 or so people, incredible what we need to get everybody out. It's the first time where I've seen it where we fill up evacuation center after evacuation center. So I don't want to steal, even though I enjoy doing it to the sheriff, I don't want to steal all his thunder. So I'm going to pass it off to him, and we'll come back to questions at the end, I'm sure we can get time.
Thank you, Chief. We do a lot of community presentations, and so I start stealing all the fire terms and use some of the stuff in my presentation, so we didn't do that today. Thomas Angle, Shasta County Sheriff. I'm also the Director of Emergency Services for the 13 Northern California counties. We call that Region 3. When we have fires, our folks on the ground, our deputy sheriffs, men and women working out there, usually as it starts to spread and it looks like it might be threatening residences and structures, they team up right away with the incident commander that's on the scene, some of the initial attacks, and then usually it punts to, I think, a battalion chief usually comes out a little bit later. Is that correct? And then if it gets a lot of momentum and spread, then of course it gets much more resources to it. And so we're working hand in hand with the fire folks on where to evacuate, what to evacuate, and try and get way out ahead and give those notices. And that's important because of the fire behavior. Everything's a little bit different. This was a very, very fast moving fire. We have one up in Lakehead right now that's on the east side of I-5 called the Hertz Fire. That one is a very slow moving fire. And I think, Brett, you said it only grew by about 400 acres last night, roughly. So that's very slow moving, and so gives us a little more time. But the big thing is we don't take these evacuations lightly, and when we go and ask or tell people to evacuate, they need to evacuate. And it gives them some time, hopefully some time. This was, again, a very fast-moving fire, but to get out. And then if they don't, they're placing themselves in danger, their family in danger, and then the firefighters in danger, because then they have to try and come and do a rescue. And Chief Hebrard, you heard some of those heroic efforts by the firefighters to get some families out. When we were on Keswick Dam Road, we ended up picking up 2 people. One person was kind of just standing in the middle of the road trying to get his vehicles out. But they were all burnt around. The vehicles hadn't been burnt up. Loaded him up in our vehicle, and then there was another person just walking down the road, and they had what we call the 1,000-yard stare on them. So they were functioning, but they really didn't know what was going on. And we loaded him up, and it probably saved their lives because we were close to getting burned over a few times there. So I was joking with Chief Hebrard that there was a St. Christopher medal on his dash, and St. Christopher had his eyes covered where we were driving. So, but we give these evacuation notices, and we do it for a number of reasons, especially in the county. The roads are narrow, fire apparatus are big and wide. So if you got people coming out and fire apparatus coming in, that can cause a gridlock. And the roads were just chaos and pandemonium that night. Bumper to bumper, we had one of our vehicles that had been near Market and Lake Boulevard. Persons were panicking. One of our patrol cars got rammed, and the person just did a hit and run and kept driving. Luckily, didn't hit the officer. I think there was some CAL FIRE rigs that got bumped and run into with people trying to get out, and that was because they were waiting to the last minute. I-5 was bumper to bumper, crawling along at about 5 to 15 miles an hour, so we had to use our emergency lights and go into the median just to get past it, to get from point A to point B. And so
we set up the evacuation centers. Shasta College played a key role, and we've only used it, Shasta College, I think, once or twice. I remember the Jones fire, this was an evacuation center as well. Big help because you got a big campus here, and at one point, I think there was close to 500 people here. Some other people evacuated that maybe didn't have to, but that's okay. And then many of the major insurance companies came here and set up their motorhomes and trailers and stuff to help the victims here. And we had, at one time, 5 evacuation centers set up. We had Shasta College, Foothill High School, Cross Point Community Church. I'm missing one. Simpson University, and of course Shasta College. And then we had Trinity High School over in Weaverville set up, not only for some of the Trinity County folks, but initially it was set up for when we did the evacuations in French Gulch. And there was a number of people over there as well. Huge. And of course, my hat's off to Red Cross, Salvation Army, and then the many volunteers that help out, as well as my understanding some of the Shasta College staff was here when the evacuation center was here helping out as well, so thank you all very much. So then we give evacuation notices. We do that through a number of ways, whether it be through our community alert system, which is like reverse 911 for hardline phones, cellular phones. We use the emergency alert system, which is can come across your AM/FM radio, or you see a crawler. We call it a crawler. It's a ribbon that comes across your TV screen for evacuations. We used a system also called the Integrated Public Warning Alert System, and that goes through cellular towers, and that puts out a broader alert system. So even if you're visiting, say, from out of the area or out of state, if your cell phone is active, you could get that alert. So it casts a bigger net, and sometimes that causes some confusion, or maybe people don't listen to the entire warning of where we're giving specific evacuations, but they still get that, and that was beneficial as well. It cast a bigger net, and we also had one where we said, hey, we're going to evacuate the city of Shasta Leak. A little bit of overreach. We didn't actually do evacuations there, but I'd rather be out ahead of it and give it an evacuation notice than not. So some people said, hey, we didn't get an evacuation notice. It's possible, because again, this was so fast moving. Officers were calling in locations, an area where they were trying to evacuate, or get out ahead and have our dispatch center get into these computer systems. Well, they couldn't keep up with as fast as it was going to get all those notices out. The big thing is, rely on a little bit of self-reliance and common sense. Is if you think you might need to evacuate, don't wait for our notice. You don't have to have the door knock. You can just go ahead and evacuate, and that helps. I know that Reading Police, again, it was moving so fast that they were on the PA systems trying to give warnings and out, because their units were starting to get overrun by fire as well. So it's very difficult. I've been to some of the assistance centers. You see some people, it's a whole process, much like a grieving process. One lady was just sitting in her chair, and she had that 1,000-yard stare, and I went over and spoke with her, and I said, it's a little bit overwhelming. She goes, it's a lot overwhelming, and she had a stack of papers. She had lost her home. And I said, just take it one line at a time. If you can get your name on the top, and then go to the next box, a little bit, and then they got a counselor over to help her out. Kids are impacted. Been a lot of loss, and adults look at it a little bit differently, but kids have their losses too, whether it be their favorite animal or toy, like a stuffed animal, but that can cause them a lot of trauma as well, and there's assistance out there. And now we've stood up a local assistance center. We call that a LAC, and then now we're into a disaster recovery center, and that's assisted by FEMA and the State Office of Emergency Services, as well as local state agencies here to help as well, as like how do you get your driver's license replaced, your registration to your car, the pink slip. Even though the car is destroyed, to get reimbursed, you need those documents to show to the insurance company, and then to dispose of that vehicle that's all burned out. And so those are all in that disaster recovery center, as well as the insurance companies as well. And then there's Office of Emergency Services will help people with the disaster cleanup for hazardous materials, removing things like propane tanks and where chemicals that you have in your house, whether it be household cleaners or pesticides, they'll go in and get that removed where it was in the garage and then do some testing. They can also help remove those cars and then eventually scrape the areas that were burned out and then move forward. And that's all working with the landowner if they want it. If they don't, they can go through the working with their insurance company and go through the private expense of it. And we know that there was a lot of people that were underinsured or not insured at all, and that's going to be a long time for recovery as well. But we're all working together. I know OES and FEMA will probably be here for quite some time. I declared a local emergency, then right away in touch with the governor's office. He declared a disaster for Shasta County that led to an initial order by the White House for some additional resources to help us. And then once we got some numbers together, communicated with the White House, and then President Trump declared a major disaster here for Shasta County, and that's going to help. That's where FEMA comes in and housing. But the evacuations, we're still into it day 26 as well, and then we had some other fires up in Fall River, MacArthur area, and of course the Hertz fire that we're working with. So my applause goes out to the men and women, law enforcement, that helped us with evacuations, which included Reading Police Department, Marshal's Office, Probation, CHP locally, and then I asked for law enforcement mutual aid. We brought in probably close to 400 officers from throughout the state. CHP sent up about 140, California National Guard about 250, National Guard MP that assisted us at the roadblocks, and then counties and cities from all over the North State region had officers up here assisting us as well. Once we evacuate an area, then we have patrols in there to look for thieves and looters and other scum that want to victimize somebody twice. They get victimized of having to evacuate or losing their home, and then they go in and rip stuff off there. There was a number of arrests made, both for looting, being in an evacuated area, which is a crime, and then also maybe somebody was in an evacuated area and they just had a warrant for their arrest. That was probably stopping a looting by a person getting picked up there. And the district attorney is promising full prosecution under the extent of the law. They're staying in jail. One just got sentenced to 60 days, and he's not going to be on work release. He's doing his time in another county, and we'll do his time down there to the full extent that we can and take care of those. So I'm going to leave it there. Pleasure to serve you, but thanks to the men and women that really, it's a team effort between law enforcement and the fire crews. So thank you all very much. And now I'd like to introduce Captain Bill Schuler from the Reading Police Department, and again, an integral part of helping us out as well.
Hi there. As I said, my name is Bill Schuler. I am a field operations commander, so I run all our patrol division. Any uniform cop you see in the building or around us works under me. I knew Tom would steal a lot of my thunder, so he always does. So I'll talk about a little different perspective. Almost just over 3 weeks ago yesterday, when the fire started approaching the city, we were starting to create plans, and we had resources with the CAL FIRE down at the Incident Command Center to kind of prepare for evacuations as the fire moved into town. But as Chief Hebrard showed, that our plans all went out the window because that fire came into our town in about 90 minutes in places we weren't necessarily prepared for in that kind of time frame. You think about if 35,000 people roughly that we're trying to evacuate through major arteries in the city, and as we talked about, it was all the roads were clogged. So luckily we did have help from CHP and other agencies to try and turn two-lane roadways going two different directions into one-lane roadways, and we cut I-5, the State Route 44 and 299 off at I-5. That was kind of our line in the sand We were going to evacuate the entire half of the city up to I-5 if necessary, and that's the plans we made over that time frame. I kind of look at it as controlled chaos. We basically turned a section of our building into a command center, and we had maps. We have a new product, a new software system that we're still in testing, but it has automobile vehicle locators, AVLs, on all our patrol cars. And we brought that up and had it up on a screen so we could see where our officers were, because while they're trying to kick in doors and evacuate people, the fire's overrunning them, and we're getting information from CAL FIRE saying, get your people out of there, and so we could see who was where and direct them out of those hazardous locations and then move them to other places to evacuate. So when I say controlled chaos, that's exactly what it was. It was, in my 25-year career, I've never seen anything like it. It was crazy. But one of the things I like to touch on is every day I hear a heroic story of a fireman, of a utility worker, of a police officer. Yesterday I heard a story from a resident who was at a home in River Park Highlands, Lake Reading Estates. They had not evacuated. They were in their home. The back of their house was on fire. They didn't know it. They're an elderly couple. And two of my guys kicked in their door and pulled them out. I heard a story of a helicopter dumping its water tank, landing down on a fire road and rescuing people that vehicle was overrun by fire. Firemen throwing people in the back of their trucks. It was, that day to me is almost surreal. Like, I think about it and I go, what happened that day? It just happened so fast. We did an all-call for our officers, and 90% came in, even while their own families were evacuating. Myself, we live out in the west side of town, and I was at work, my family's at home. I call them on the phone, say, you gotta get out. And I have a 16-year-old daughter without a license, so she got in my car and drove without a license. She has her license now. She got it Tuesday. But I figured if anybody's going to stop her, they got better things to do. So she drove my car, my wife's car, and my wife drove the truck, and we got out of our house, and we were one of the lucky ones. Our house was spared. But not so, a lot of people were not so lucky. And the last thing I'll talk about real quick is a lot of people had questions about the repopulation process, and I was intimately involved with that. And it's an interesting thing. I've never been part of that before, obviously. And so CAL FIRE, I got to tell you how impressed I am with those guys. They know how to do this stuff. They have a very good system of how they manage incidents. And so getting to see how they do things, it's kind of cool to learn from a fireman once in a while. Each day, after we got Thursday out of the way, and they were starting to what they call black line, where they put controlled areas around the fire and said, hey, we've got this control, we think you can repopulate these areas. And then each day at 8 a.m. and 3 p.m., we would meet with the operations commander for CAL FIRE and all the utility companies, everybody you can think of, PG&E, city utilities, water, everybody, the sheriff's department, us, CHP, and we would sit there with a map as bigger than that screen and try to figure out how we could repopulate that area safely, let residents back in as quickly as possible. And you have to think about, there's hundreds of power poles down and power lines laying in the road and phone systems down, and some places had no water, no power, so we had to get those resources, those things tied up first. But it was a very interesting process over about 10 days. I think 10 days we had the entire city repopulated. And I just think that was phenomenal for us to get that done that quick. And all the city departments, all the county agencies, everybody came together in this big room with the same goal, and it worked really well. So if you're out of your house for a few days, there was a really good reason for it. We really tried hard to get people back as fast as we could, as safely as we could. And then we also, if you remember, we did these soft repopulations where we let only residents in, because we knew if we let everybody in at once, you would have everybody else driving through these neighborhoods and not allowing people time to grieve at the loss of their house. So it was a very interesting process. I learned a lot. The last thing I'll share is my house. I've got a thin blue line flag hanging there, and so I think flag hanging there. So I think everybody knows that. All my neighbors do know I'm a cop, and probably all the firefighters that drive by my house, which was burning on the opposite side of the street, knew I was a cop. So my daughter put a sign up on the tree at the top of our driveway. It says, "Cops need heroes too. Thank you, firefighters."
Yes, Whiskey Town. It's right in the middle. It is the center of this fire. You got a fire that touched Trinity, Shasta, and Whiskey Town Lakes all at once. The entire park is essentially burned. Some of it not devastatingly. I understand they're going to have it closed for quite some time. Brett may have some more info on when they plan on opening it, though.
I don't have any exact dates, but I can tell you that they have their own team of people that's coordinating with us. There's a lot of issues in there surrounding just the services, and just to give you an example, their water treatment plant was burned down, their bathrooms are burned down, so they're looking for temporary fixes to those to get the park open as soon as possible. That's their goal, is to get it to where the public can use it again. So putting porta potties in place and temporary facilities so that the park is usable. The other thing is removing all the hazards. There's a lot of hazard trees out there, and getting those out of there. Similar to repopulating a neighborhood, making sure that there is no hazards in and around the park for people to go ahead and enjoy that park again. So I'm always being directed, so I just go where they tell me. So anyway, we are working very closely with the park. We will continue to for months to come. But from the park superintendent, Patrick Gubbins, his intention is to get it open as soon as possible. And it's just going to take a little time to get all those things cleaned up.
So we've been working with the Park Service as well. The Visitor Center on Kennedy Memorial Drive is open at this time. And then at noon today, they're going to open JFK Memorial Drive down to the dam. Then at the dam, it becomes what they call Page Bar that goes to Brandy Creek. Page Bar is going to remain closed, and then JFK is open. There's a cemetery down off of JFK near Muletown Road. That's going to be open, and Muletown Road is open. But then, as the chief said, many parts of it's going to be closed. There's a Whiskey Creek Road that goes near the post office there. That's going to be closed because there's a big culvert that goes underneath the road that's damaged, so that's going to be closed. And then many miles of trails. The chief talked about having to remove those hazards, and those can be standing trees that still present a hazard that's partially burned, and we don't want anybody to get injured. There's still some power lines down. I was out there yesterday driving, and AT&T crews are still working at removing wire, replacing poles that have also been hazards. And so that's going to take some time to get that up and running, but everybody is working very hard to get that restored as well. And then there's boat docks at Oak Bottom Marina and a number of boats that are still in the water that were damaged. So it's going to take a few months for that.
Do you have any idea how long it's going to take for 299 to be fully open without pilot cars?
I do not. We could have had Caltrans here, but they're doing everything they can. They were starting well before, obviously the fire's not out yet, but even as there was less danger there, they had emergency crews coming in and replacing guardrail. PG&E and the utility companies have just been doing yeoman's work to get those wires removed and poles back up. They had poles back up in French Gulch, and then French Gulch had a fire hook back around and come back into French Gulch and burnt the poles that they just put up. And so they have to start all over again. So right now they are having some escorts there. It is open. but it's going to take a few months to get everything back to normal. And then, here we are almost to September. We're not in our peak fire season yet. It's very early. The fuels have been much drier than normal. And with the weather systems, see, I'm stealing their thunder again. I pick up on all the fire lingo here. But usually our peak time for fire is September, correct me if I'm wrong, September, October-ish. So I work with these guys enough that I pick up all the fire lingo. But so we're still working on that. So unknown, but they are getting paving and working as much as they can to get that open without restrictions. Oh, ouch. They said I secretly want to be a fireman, so. Any other questions?
If you can repeat the question so we can all hear.
So you're saying if we don't get rain, will the complex fire, and I think you're talking about the Mendocino complex, the river and ranch fires? I would have always said no for the last 30 years, but after this last 3 weeks, no, I don't see that happening. They actually have a good plan that they have been working on. That fire's I think it was about 350,000 acres maybe today. It's up over into Glenn County, part of it. I just don't once you can get it into the flats, they should be able to catch that part of the fire. We're at a drawdown statewide for equipment-wise, so it's just wrestling over who gets what equipment. I know Brett gets pressured every day. Hey, he had 5,000 people on his fire. Get us equipment off your fire as soon as you can. But he's still got a 220,000 acre fire he's fighting. So it's just moving stuff around statewide and hoping we don't get any new fires.
We have a question back here. Hold on.
In light of what happened in the Santa Barbara area last year with the mudslides and all of those things following the fire, are there any prevention? I know that's a long ways out, but do we think about stuff like, is that in the plan?
Absolutely. So the Thomas fire last year was 282,000 acres. In December, they obviously were up against the wall. It rained 2 weeks later, so they didn't have near I'll call it the planning time that we do. We have what we call the Watershed Emergency Response Team that is evaluating this entire fire, and they're looking for places for the mudslides, the culverts, all those types of things. They'll have a report out next week, along with the burned area emergency response team, the BEAR team, on the federal lands, where they actually go out, put straw down, those types of things. Chief Gavea just put a meeting together last week where we had all the players in the room get this done, and I can assure you that the city manager, Barry Tippin, the county CEO, Larry Lees, are on pushing them, OES and FEMA, to help and get the restoration done as quickly as possible so we don't have those mudslides.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
I'm just saying they're all coming from this side, Joe.
Yeah, they like you,
Just
Eva.
pointing that out. Do you need a mic or can you?
I'm originally from Trinity County and moved here a couple years ago. I was just so worried about everybody over there too during all of this, and I'm wondering, do you guys feel with the higher containment right now, fairly confident that like Lewiston is kind of out of the woods now?
Yeah, the entire west side, the north and west side of the fire is buttoned up very tight right now. We're actually pulling hose off of this fire right now. We have over 200 miles of hose that the firefighters have put on the ground. If you think about that, that's pretty incredible. That goes past Stockton, right? So we're actually pulling hose in there. The reason we're at 75% is I talked about that interior burning and having it up against Shasta Lake. Until we secure that along there against Shasta Lake, and there's no threat of the fire spotting across Shasta Lake, that's that 25% that we're playing with right now, and that'll get better every day. But as far as the north, the west, and the south side of the fire, we're feeling very secure.
And so what we've been working with too is this fire has had probably the most amount of community meetings that I've seen too, and that's to keep the community informed. Those people that have been impacted with the evacuations. You've been over, what, Trinity to 3 or 4 times now. We've had a number of meetings here. We're having them up in the Lakehead community to keep people informed. And of course, if you check all of our social media sites, our web pages, we keep putting information out there. CAL FIRE updates the car fire, or I think every fire, twice a day, about 7 and 7. So you can get information there as well, what's going on here locally.
Joe, we're done.
I'm going to call up here Nuridin Zyadnikov. Can you come up? With the American Red Cross, and he was living on campus for a couple of weeks with us. And so So kind of the idea is we got to see a lot of the big picture, and now we're going to zoom in a little bit more about what happened here at the college. And I asked Nuridin if he'd come and share a few minutes on kind of his perspective as running the evacuation centers, not just here, but all those other ones you heard about. He was in charge of all the evacuation centers in the area for the American Red Cross. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to share.
Thank you, everyone. Last time I was in front of so many people as I was in trouble in college. So thank you. The operation itself was, just like all of our law enforcement and firefighters said, it was amazing. It was an amazing speed. We had a shelter set up in Shasta Heights, and if you know where it is, in the west side of Reading, we had to evacuate that place. And we talked about people being rescued, and that was like being in a war zone. Winds coming up so fast and getting that warning, and just like in any tragedy, this was the opportunity for the community to get together. We had 3 pallets of water, not including everything else that we had, snacks and cots and everything else. And people pulling up and saying, hey, what can I take? Where are we taking it? And the place that we had to go, given the size and the scope of what was going on, we said, let's just go to college. They seem to have their act together a little bit. So we ended up here. We opened cafeteria first. And well, yeah, we will maybe hopefully get it all in one place. You look outside already, we have a couple of hundred people. And the cafeteria could only hold about, at one point it held about 120, I think. And next was the gym. Next was the ground. Next was the farm. Next was the football field. At the end of the second day, I think, I didn't sleep at that point, we had about 845 people sleeping on campus. And just to give you an idea, I have about 500 cots staged just in Shasta County in Reading alone. So that meant pulling resources, just like CAL FIRE, Red Cross operates in pulling the mutual aid resources from other areas. And I have 6 counties, so I have no problem. I don't have to ask anyone to pull stuff. So for the 6 counties I was pulling, and by the time that we opened just this college, I used up every single cot in northern state. And that's when the state came in, that's when our partners, that's when the national came in. The recruitment, so we talk about 850 or so people sleeping, that's just clients. And we had other sites, Simpson, all of them at capacity almost. That's including the Trinity. And on this side, for this specific disaster response, we brought in over 300 responders across, not just across the state, but across the nation. That's Red Cross volunteers, giving up the comfort of their home to come and help our community here. And I was lucky enough, I didn't have to travel that far, but For all 300 and plus folks, that meant literally leaving everyone, leaving everything in their homes and coming here to help us. And that's what I'm honored to work for. People willing to help people. And that was the biggest help that I saw here. We had all kinds of partners here. Our corporate partners, Walmart, Target, Rayleigh's, and Amazon, think of all of them. We were getting shipments and shipments and shipments of everything. And they were all coming here because we didn't stop asking for a room. Yeah, in college, I honestly was surprised, and I was waiting for someone to say, no, that's enough, you cannot have any more rooms. But that didn't happen. We had 2,200, 1,200, every single one over there, and plus we took over the camp safety building. Yeah, that's where our headquarters was. And the whole operation itself was such an amazing thing. And
All the blue buildings were being used.
yeah, there you go. Look at that. We were over 50%, it looks like. That's not something I want to be proud of at next time. But the whole operation, and you know, this is all your property. We were your guests, and you know, with the help of camp safety, your facilities, and every single person, I think, can I get a show of hands how many people were here doing those evacuations? Thank you. You know, we did a little bit of work, but every single one of you did give up so much. This is not a routine for you guys. For us and for law enforcement, for CAL FIRE, this is a routine thing, but this was the first time of this scale for the college. And for the amount of notice that we got, how short the whole thing was, everyone stepped up. That shows the resilience of the community. That shows the willingness to sacrifice our own comfort to help those in a greater need. And I truly, truly thank you. Thank you, college. Thank you, amazing staff, every single one of you. That were here and that were not, I know it was in thoughts and prayers of every single one of you, and we truly appreciate it. Thank you.
So I'm glad you asked that question of who was on campus. According to our first preliminary numbers, on our peak day we had in 24 hours 144 different employees at various points on campus. I was sharing with the board Wednesday night that I vaguely remember signing some form when I got hired here 11 years ago that said, oh, in the event of a disaster, you might be called on to be a disaster service worker. Oh, that never happens, right? But hopefully all of you signed that form. But it did happen, and I think the college really stepped up. So to kind of bring it into a more common experience for those of you who weren't around and were taking care of other matters, just going to go back and go through a few slides and show you a few things here to finish out this section of the morning. So I did put a thank you National Guard sign up. We had a little traffic control and a presence of the National Guard at our entrances, which was helpful. If you ask Lonnie, our campus safety director, he'll say it was just a great deterrent for the people who were trying to come in for the wrong reasons, perhaps. So just knowing that we had a presence like that, it would send a message, this is a safe place for our evacuees. If you're thinking of making trouble, don't come on campus. Now, ironically, I know we have a member of the National Guard sitting right there, and you weren't called up to help us. They brought people from Southern California to help us. I don't know why. What's up with that, Robert? But, okay, well, he joked with me about that. He goes, I live right here, and they didn't call me up. And then we already mentioned, our guest mentioned Jeremy Stoke. He was one of our part-time instructors, as well as being a firefighter in the area. And so I thought we'd just take a moment of silence in his honor. The ultimate sacrifice was given by a few in this fight, and our hearts go out to Jeremy's family. So this was going to be my first slide, State of the College Address. We're not really doing that today, except the college is still standing, and I think we've served our community heroically, and I want to thank everyone for that. So just a few images for those of you who weren't able to be on campus. You can see this is the north parking lot, and it's a picture even when it was less full than later, and the lines of people waiting for food. Salvation Army kind of took care of the feeding coordination. We did have in two of our facilities evacuated nursing home of about 90 patients. And so for about a week, we had some of our most frail community members here on campus. People were setting up, like they said, outside as well as inside. We're pretty careful of some of the pictures. You know, the Red Cross is very helpful for us. We tried to vet pictures and not have ones of all the clients and things. But here's some of our community partners. You see the Salvation Army brought in trucks. The Hope mental health folks were here helping a lot. Got a few snapshots of some of our staff. So these are the most important people. No, I'm just kidding. These are just random photos, but thank you. If you got up there, you made it. But some of our coaches came in and they were helping. Our staff, kind of a volunteer meeting, briefing going on in the lobby of the 100 building. So very important jobs checking in the locker rooms. Think about it, having 800 plus people all wanting to shower, coordinating all of that sort of stuff. It's like our custodial staff, think about what they did. Having a football game for a week straight. They were trying to clean those bathrooms. My point was, it's like having a football game for a week straight. They were trying to keep those bathrooms clean, and it was a tough job. Down on the farm. This was one of our last evacuees right here. I took that picture right before the farm closed. We had a desert tortoise and all kinds of animals. Our dorm farm workers and our faculty, and they did an amazing job. People are very attached to their pets. How many of you are attached to your pets? If you talk to certain of our people who worked here, they'll say every time there was a problem, it had to do with a pet. And then you talk to the people who worked on the farm, and they said it was the people, not the pets. But I think this was probably, it was a difficult job because a lot of people wanted to stay near their pets, and so we were having to get food down to the farm, and Trina and everybody did such a great job, and BJ, and I'm leaving people out, but wonderful, wonderful work down there. I see Trina there. How many pets do you think? 110 dogs and cats and 70 people wanted to stay near their pets down there. So That was a tough situation and it was the people. They know how to take care of animals. Taking care of the people was a little more challenging, right? So, our dorms were used. Here's some of, Renee Tolbert took some pictures. Here's some LA County firefighters, and they were getting breaks and sleeping in the dorms and having a little break time with the pool tables and stuff. So that's why the dorms were blue buildings in that map. And then a few of our employees were allowed to stay in the dorms as well if they needed a place to stay when they were evacuated. I thought this would be a fun picture just to share. There's so many details that you don't think about offhand. This is a press conference, and see Kevin's there instead of me. That was very good engineering on my part. I had worked, I don't know how many hours straight, and Kevin said, "You go home and rest, and I'll take the day shift." And then this press conference happened, and Kevin had to do the press conference, and then I came back in, he goes, "And we're switching. You're doing the night, I'm doing the night shifts, and you're doing the day shifts." So. But things like arranging meals, we tried to feed all of our employees who were coming in and not impact the Salvation Army feeding the evacuees. Well, we had lots of local businesses calling, saying, "Hey, we want to feed your employees. We see what you're doing there." And so C.R. Gibbs, Bleachers, other places. Look at that, leftovers got crossed off. It was just kind of, but we came up with, the tracking sheet of how are we tracking the meals and not getting duplicated meals donated and those sorts of things. I ended up, I'm going to confess, I gained 5 pounds that week, and because you're sitting there and you're stress eating, and then they bring this tri-tip in, and then, it was... And then pizza would come in, and Kevin would come back in off duty because he wanted that pizza. And just fun story. We had a lot of laughter along with the stress, relieving the stress. And so that's kind of where I want to go with this. That stories, sharing stories with each other, a little laughter will help us heal and help us serve our students better. So I'm going to share a couple of real brief stories. One of the fun parts of the time was, do you guys recognize this fella? Guy Fieri. I guess he's from the coast, Eureka area. His folks called him and said, "We want to come and set up and feed the evacuees, and we can feed 10,000 meals a day." And I'm gonna be honest. My first thought was, is this a publicity stunt? Is this going to be like news cameras we're going to deal with, and now we have to find an area for 5 semis type spaces and campers and is this just going to be a big problem? Well, it was not like that at all. He was out there for 2 days straight cooking and working, was not a publicity hound at all, was really there for the right reasons, and that was really kind of cool. Now, one of the fun parts, however, was, you see this guy right here, George Estrada? I mean, look at that face. George really was, wow, if you see him, he was falling over backwards for Guy Fieri. He's a fan. He was excited. Usually George is like, you ask him to do something, he's like, well, where's the funds for that? How are we going to arrange for that? I got to rely on this. Anything you need, Guy, we'll set this up. It was a new side of George Estrada. But Lonnie C., there's a little bit of a rivalry there, and he was giving George a hard time about Guy, but if you look at Lonnie's face in that photo, I think Guy has another biggest fan that's come out of this. So, but that was a little bit of the ribbing and the laughter that we had while dealing with the stressful situation. And then my last little story I'll share, Morgan Hannaford sent me a couple of pictures, and here's a picture of your place, Morgan, right? But he wanted me to know that everything's okay because in his car, he did find his work keys. So that's one less set of forms you're going to need to fill out. So, but thank you, Morgan. He said it's fine to share this, and just he said you got to have laughter to help the healing. And so thank you for letting me share that with your fellow colleagues. We did set up some fundraising accounts. You've probably seen my emails on those. We've got over $43,000 raised so far. We already have some aid going out to students, and financial aid office and student services has set up, what are we calling the center over in 2300? Student Support Center. If you have students in need, please send them there. They have a vetting process, and we're already getting some grants up to $500 out to students to help them in their recovery. They lost their books, they lost their computer, those sorts of things. So thank you, student services folks. And so usually I go through and I show pictures of all our new employees and stuff. I'm not going to do that this time for sake of time, but I just want the new employees to know you've joined a very special place. What we've gone through and how we served our community, how we came together, I've never been prouder to be a Knight. And you've joined a very, very special family. And we're doing this for our students, right? And we're going to be part of the rebuilding effort to help getting our community back to normal and healed over the next couple of years. So welcome aboard, new employees. We got a great day planned. I'm going to have Frank come up and share a little bit more about the rest of the day.